Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Piombo, and I am a third-year PhD student in the Health Behavior Research Program. Our boot camp was actually my first introduction to R 2 years ago. So I'm super excited to be here to present the introduction, and I'm glad that we can do it virtually. So thank you, George, for setting this up and continuing to make it available. I use R mostly for social network analysis in my research. And yeah, that's pretty much the introduction to what I do. I don't know if you have anything to say, George, or if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm a graduate from the PhD in Biostats. And yeah, we've been doing the bootcamp for the last, is this the fourth or third year? I'm not sure. So maybe it might be the fourth time. I'm not sure if it is the fourth or not, but so yeah, this is just a way for you to get like a first glimpse into what's R and how can you use it. We do use R in a lot of classes in the department now. So you will be, if you are enrolled as a student, you for sure will be like seeing using R now. And again, so this is just like an introduction. We do not hope for you guys to like become experts right away, but hopefully you will find this useful for the future as a reference and to see that it's not that scary to work with R. So yeah, I think that's it. And thank you, Sarah, for volunteering. So by the way, this is not sponsored like financially, I would say, by the department or anything. This is just volunteers, like people who have been helping throughout the years, like preparing the slides and presenting and helping out. So that's it. So go ahead, Sarah.
All right. Okay. So as George said, this is a good little introduction to R. So today we're going to talk about the basics of what R is and give an example of some data visualizations. So just a quick overview, we're going to talk about what is R and what is RStudio and the difference between the two. We're going to talk about how to get help with R and look at documentation in RStudio. And then we're going to walk through an example of data visualization using the ggplot2 package. And if you have any questions during the presentation, go ahead and pop that in the chat. And I think George is monitoring that, so he should be able to help you out. Okay, so first of all, what is R? R is a language and environment for statistical computing and graphics. It is an open source programming language, meaning that people write packages and code and make it available to everyone in the community. And there's a lot of tutorials, resources, just a really large community surrounding R, and a lot of resources available online to help you learn and use code and packages that other people develop. George is a developer and he's made some cool packages that I use for my own work as well. And there's pretty much thousands of packages available for almost anything you can think of doing. It's a very flexible program, and it's really cool to see everything that people develop for it. RStudio is an integrated development environment for R, which is how we interact with R, or we'll get into looking at that in a second. But one analogy that you can think of with R in RStudio is that if you want to think of it like a car, R is like the engine. It's kind of what's underneath the hood doing the work and doing the computing. And RStudio is like the car's dashboard, which is how you interact with R through the controls and the features and telling it what to do. So that's kind of a very like general difference between R and RStudio. But today we're going to be using RStudio for the tutorial and walking through some of the basic features and just getting you familiar with the environment and everything like that. So one way you can access R is through the terminal of your computer. If you wanted, you could go to your terminal and type in R, and that would open R, and you could execute commands directly through the terminal that way. But using RStudio, you can do a couple different things at once. So this is a screenshot of what RStudio looks like. You generally have the 4 panes with your code, with your environment, with the console, and with your files and plots. So if we hop over to RStudio on my computer really quick, this is what it looks like in my setup. I have mine a little bit different than the default. Usually the console is underneath the editor, but it's just up to you with what you prefer and how you want to look at things. I personally like having my editor and my console next to each other. And then I have my files and my environment down here. So first of all, the console is when you run any code, it will show up in the console, and any errors with your code will also show up here. So you can directly type commands into the console and run them that way. Or your editor is where you edit code, write R scripts, and you can also run commands from here as well. So, and then you have your file pane where you can see your files. And then when we make our plots later, they'll show up for preview here. And then your environment is where any variables you create or any objects or data sets or things that you load, they'll show up here as well. So if you wanted to set up your panes in a different way, you could go to View and then Panes and then Pane Layout. And this is how you would customize which panes you want in which spot. You could put the console, like the default, the console would be down here, but you can move it to wherever you want and just whatever works best for you in your workflow. Another thing you can do is customize the appearance of RStudio, which is kind of fun. So you can choose all these different themes, whatever you prefer, whatever you like. A lot of people like the dark theme. Mine was this, but I think I'll just go back to the default one for the tutorial today. So you just apply whatever theme you would like and click OK, and you're good to go. So that is the general layout of what it looks like. Yes, so that's RStudio. And now we're going to talk about how to run commands and load packages and do some of the basic things that you need to get started in R. So as George mentioned, this entire presentation was generated using R Markdown, which is pretty cool. And you guys will learn more about that later because R Markdown can do a lot of different things. But for now, we'll get started with talking about executing commands, loading packages, and loading data sets. So R comes with a lot of base functions, but you install these things called packages that basically contain code and functions and data sets that people have compiled in a way that you can easily access. So today we're going to be using the ggplot2 package. And you basically will install the package, and then whenever you want to use it, when you start a new session, you would need to load in the package or the packages that you want to use. So going back over to RStudio, in the console or from the editor. So for example, if I just wanted to create a variable, say I just wanted to make a variable called A and give it a value of 100, I could type that directly into the console and hit enter. And then it shows up in my environment, the variable. Alternative, if I was writing a script and I wanted to do that over here, I could create another variable. And if I wanted to run the command from here, if you are on the same line as this and you hit Command Enter, or on a Mac, it's Command Enter, Command Return. I'm not sure on Windows. Then it will run that single line of code. So then we see it go to the console, and then in the environment, we see the variable I just made. And this little arrow is kind of how we assign values to things. And on Mac, the shortcut for that is Alt -, or like, yeah, Alt or Option and the minus. And then, you know, you can type whatever you want. And I could either run the single line of code by hitting Command Return, or I could highlight it if I wanted to run multiple lines of code. And I could either click Run or, again, Command Return, and it will send it to the console. And then now we see this new variable I've created, and it all shows up down here. So I kind of like to have it set up this way just so I can see things in my environment as I create them. But yes, so once again, you can put commands directly into the console or into the editor on a script, and you can highlight them to run one line at a time or multiple lines at a time, depending on what you're doing. So that is just how you would execute commands. And now we'll talk about installing and loading packages. So if you haven't already installed the ggplot2 package, the way you would do that is you would type install.packages and then ggplot2. I already have it installed on my computer, but you would type that and then you would run the command to install it. So I'll give you guys a second to do that if you haven't already done so. But after you install the package, or if you were opening a new session and you were going to load the package, like I just have opened R and I want to create some plots today, then you type library ggplot2, and that will automatically load the package. If I, excuse me, if I wanted to know more about what this library function does, so I just used it to load the package, but you can get help with any function by typing either question mark and then the function that you want to know more information about. And that will bring up a help page over in this file, or in this pane. So if I type question mark library, that brings me to the help page for the library function. And it says library is used to load and attach add-on packages. And then it gives you the arguments that the function takes. And it gives you some more details in the documentation. And then at the bottom, they give you examples. So it tells you some examples on how to use it. So this is pretty much what we just did. We just attached a package by going library and then the package name. So you can do this to look up help for any function that you are doing. And so that's a nice handy little feature to keep in mind if you are trying to run some code, you need an example of how to run it, then you can always type that, or you can actually also type help. And then I believe that does the same thing. Yeah. So either question mark or help will bring you to that page. So that's how, sorry.
Yeah, no, just to mention, you should actually be a friend with the help function in R, with the manuals in general, because compared to other programming languages, all the packages that live in CRAN, the Comprehensive R Archive Network, which is where the R packages live when a developer uploads it, they actually have a very strict set of rules for an R package to be published there. So meaning that if you have an R package that is on CRAN, for sure it will have a very extensive documentation, it will have examples, and it will be, and the documentation will match the functions. So meaning that, for example, I don't know, in Python, I don't think that's the case. You can publish things like that. If you're a data user, you can have things uploaded to SSC, I believe, but they might not be well documented. And that's not the case with R. So R is usually very well documented, the function. So you become a friend with it.
Definitely. Yeah, I always am, double checking things and using the help feature. And it's really nice that that's available. Yeah, and so next we want to load in the diamonds data set, which is what we're going to be using today. And the command, so this diamonds data set is actually part of the ggplot2 package. It comes installed with it. So if I wanted to load that, I would type data and then diamonds, and then I would run that. And now we have a data set called diamonds in our environment. Going back to the help function, if I wanted to know more about this data set that came installed with the package, I could put help diamonds. And then it brings us over to the help page for that, which has information about the data set. So what we're looking at today are the prices of over 50,000 round cut diamonds. And then it gives us a nice list of the variables that are available in the data set. So we have a price variable, carat, cut, color, clarity. So it gives a nice description of what we're looking at in the data today. So we've just loaded in our data set. We have our ggplot2 package installed. And we've talked about how to get help in R and look at the documentation. So moving on to the next part. What other arguments does the function data accept? So we'll go take a look at that using the help function or the help feature. And then we're also going to look at the str function and find out what that does. So first, if we wanted to know what arguments data accepts, we would go help data. And then we look at the arguments. So it just gives you more information about what arguments it would accept, like loading in data from a package, things like that. And then at the bottom, it will give you the examples of how you would actually run that. Yeah, so pretty much what we just did with loading in the diamonds data, but also very informative for looking at the details of the different arguments that you can use. And now we're going to look at the str function. So to find out what that does, we can go help str. Oops. No, that's not what I want. Okay. And that will bring us over here. And so that function compactly displays the structure of an arbitrary R object. Okay, so to do that, if we wanted to look at the structure of an object, so anything that we have in our environment, we could use this function to get more information about it. So say I want to use that to look at our diamonds data set. So I would type str diamonds, and it gives me information about the data set. So it's saying, it's giving me the dimensions of it. It's listing out all the variables. It's telling me that carat is a numeric variable, cut is an ordinal variable. So it's basically telling me about the structure of the data set. So that's a nice little feature, that's a nice function for looking at the structure of something. I could also use it just to look at, those variables we made earlier. A is a numeric variable with a value of 100. So I can examine things that way really easily just through the console to take a quick look at stuff. Okay, so let's talk about looking at data. There are a lot of different ways that data can be represented in R. One of the most popular or flexible ways of looking at data is through data frames. which is what they're called in base R, or tibbles in the case of tidyverse, which you'll learn more about tomorrow. But tibbles and data frames have the same structure, where the data entries, such as like the individual observations or people or whatever you're looking at, are organized by row. And then the features or variables are the columns. So if you've used other software like SPSS or Stata or anything like that, that's generally the structure of the data sets in those. So observations are rows, and then variables or features are columns. So data frames and tibbles are organized in that way. And here's what it looks like in R. So on top we have a tibble, and it tells you the dimensions, 6 by 10. So 6 rows by 10 columns. And it also gives you a little bit of information about each column underneath, like that this is an ordinal variable, a double, integer, double, things like that. And the data frame is the same structure. It just has, it doesn't give you the dimensions, and it doesn't tell you the types of variables underneath. But let's go over to RStudio and look at it ourselves with the diamonds data set. So we have our data set loaded in. If we want to look at just the first few observations in a data set, we can use the command head. And so head diamonds shows us the first couple of rows. So right now it's a tibble, and it just shows us the first few observations and gives us a nice little snapshot of the data set. If we wanted to look at it as a data frame, we could use the command head as data frame diamonds. And we can compare the two and see it's just showing us the first few observations, and one is the tibble and one is a data frame. So it's the same structure. You can also look at your data sets by clicking on them from the environment. If you just wanted to like look at all of it and kind of scroll through, you can click on it and it will open it up here. And we can see there's over 50,000 diamonds in here. So it's a pretty big data set. And the nice thing about R, like if you used SAS or other softwares before where you can only have like one data set open at a time, it's nice in R, you can have a bunch of different data loaded in, and you know, since your data is included in your commands, you can switch between different things, and it's nice compared to like SAS or something like that. But yeah, so that's just an overview of the difference between a tibble and a data frame and how you can look at your data sets in R. R also has functions to ask how many rows and columns an object has, and that would be the in-row and the in-call functions. So if we wanted to know how many rows there were in the diamonds data set, you could type in-row diamonds, and same thing for the columns, you could type in-call diamonds. So it will tell us in the console that there's almost 54,000 diamonds or rows, sorry, in our data set, and then we have 10 columns. So if we go back over to R, we can check that for ourselves. I'm going to run the in-row command. And there we go, it gives us the number of rows. And then same thing for the number of columns. I think you can also do dim for the dimensions, and that will just give you rows and columns. Yeah. So yeah, you can use that to look at your data and get the dimensions of your data set. So that's a good check to do. You know, if you load something in and you want to make sure that it loaded in correctly or that all your observations are in, then you can just do a quick little check like that. So now we're going to get into the data visualization, which is the fun part. So we're going to go through an example using ggplot2. And ggplot2 is an R package that is the most popular way to build plots in R. Here we're going to look at examples using the diamonds data set. So by the end of today, you're going to be an expert on diamonds and have a little bit of insight into the pricing of them. So ggplot2 does a lot. There's a lot of different, you could pretty much graph any type of data, and it's very versatile and flexible, and it's really cool, and it creates really nice, aesthetically pleasing plots. So this is going to be the end result that we get to today, but we're going to start at the beginning and talk about the basics of building a plot in R using ggplot. So the overall structure of the overall structure of ggplot is as follows. You use the ggplot command, and then, or the ggplot function sets up the data that we're using, and then the geom function tells it what type of plot we're going to build. So today we're going to make a scatter plot, but you could tell it to build a histogram, a bar plot, pretty much any type of plot there is a specification for. So that's the geom function. And then the AES mappings are the aesthetics, or how you're going to map your data onto the plot. So that indicates how the features or the columns or the variables that we're using are going to be included in the plot. And the plus sign at the end of the line is binding the commands together. So it's basically like we're building layers by, saying like, here's the data set, here's the type of plot we're building, here's how we're adding the variables to the plot. So it kind of builds in a layered way. Okay, so first, if we just started out by typing ggplot data equals diamonds, and if you ran that code, nothing would happen because we haven't told ggplot what type of plot we're trying to visualize or what variables we're using or anything like that. The function just knows that we want to work with the diamonds data set, but it doesn't have any other information, and it doesn't know what else to plot. If we added another layer to our code and we put geom point, which is specifying a scatter plot, we would get an error in the console, and it says geom point requires the following missing aesthetics, X and Y. So that means that we still need to give ggplot more information about what to visualize. We just said that we wanted to make a scatter plot, but we didn't indicate the X and the Y variables. So it's giving us an error saying, hey, you need to tell us what the X and the Y variables on this plot are going to be. So we say, okay, let's fill out this command and put the X and the Y variables in. So we would add mapping equals AES, and then X is going to be the carat, which is the size of the diamond, and then Y is going to be the price. So once we add those variables to the command, then we can get a basic looking plot. It's not the prettiest or most aesthetic one, but it does have some information on it where we can generally see that as carat increases, price increases, but it looks like there's obviously some trends going on here with these lines. And so there's probably a little bit more to the price of a diamond than just the size. So we want to add some more features to the plot to get a better idea of what's going on with the diamonds. Now we could color the plot. And this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So say that we want to add color based on the color of the diamond. So diamonds are apparently rated on color from D to J. And as we can see, the color seems to play into the price of the diamond. So once we color the plot by diamond color, we can see that there's definitely more of a pattern happening here, and it looks a lot nicer too. So first, let's do that part before we add another layer. Or yeah, we'll do that first just to catch up with where we're at. So if we go back to our studio, we are going to start here with just that first command that didn't show us anything. That's just ggplot data equals diamonds. And nothing shows up because we didn't tell R anything about the type of plot that we're creating. So we say, okay, we're gonna add the geom point, which is the specifying a scatter plot. And then we're gonna add our aesthetics, where the axis is gonna be the caret and the Y is going to be the price of the diamond. So I'm gonna run this. It might take a second because it's a big data set. And then we get this preview of this not so pretty plot. You can also click zoom if you want to pop it out into its own window. There it is. And so we see we have that very basic plot of our diamonds by carat and price, which we know we can improve upon. So next, we're going to color them by color. Just out of curiosity, if I wanted to go back and get more information about that color variable, I could go to the help for diamonds and look at it and say, okay, diamond color from D best to J worst. That's how they're rated. So if we add that to our plot, then we get a much prettier plot. Might take my computer a second to catch up. There it is. Here we go. So we can see here, now we have our color coded plot from D to J. And yeah, it looks a lot better. And we can see that there's a lot more going on with the price of diamonds based on the color and the carat. So the last thing we want to do is maybe look at another variable and kind of stratify our plot by something else. So we could add this command for the facet wrap and stratify or create different panes in our plot based on the clarity of diamonds. So there's this clarity rating system where it seems like the price also varies based on that. So we could add plus facet wrap clarity, and that will tell R to stratify it into these different panes based on that categorical variable. So now let's add that to ours. So we have everything from before, but now we have plus facet wrap clarity. And so if I run that, then it should give us a plot with all those different panes. And we can look at that and see that there's a different relationship between carat and price and color based on the clarity of a diamond as well. So pretty quickly, we've gone from not knowing anything about the price to being able to really visualize how the price changes based on these variables. And it all is very, it didn't take us too much time to write that code to get a nice looking plot like this. And you can get very custom with it. You could customize your colors and do things like that. But first we're gonna add a few more features like labeling the axes and things like that to make our plot even better. Okay, so adding titles, definitely important so that people who are looking at this will know what we're trying to show them. So the next layer that we're gonna add for the labels is gonna be this plus labs. And then you fill in the title. So we're gonna call this plot Price of Diamonds by Clarity. And then for the subtitle, data from the ggplot to our package. And then we'll label our x-axis with the weight of the diamond, the carat, and then the y-axis will be price in US dollars. And then we'll also put a little title above our key for the color so that people know that J is the worst and D is the best for the color system. So going back to our studio, let's do that to our plot. So once again, we have everything that we already did before, but now we're just doing plus labs and putting in all of those labels for the title, the subtitle, the XY, and the color. And make sure that you put these in quotes and that you have commas at the end of each label that you're adding. So this should all be in the code already, but just in case you were practicing making your own, you do have to pay attention to some of the details of the formatting. Okay, so we run that. Now we have a nicely labeled plot that shows us everything we added: price of diamonds, X and Y axis. We've got some context for the color of things. And yeah, we have this really nice visualization of the diamonds data set that we were able to put together pretty quickly. So that's our example with the diamonds data set. Now you know a lot more about the price of diamonds. But what other things can we do? There are a lot of other packages that extend from ggplot2. And we have a few examples just to show you some of the cool things that you can do. So there's this package called ggwordcloud, where you can give it a list of text and it will create a word cloud, and you can tell it what shape to be in. It's just, another cool thing you can do that somebody developed. There's ggAnimate, which allows you to create animations based, here we're looking at longitudinal data of life expectancy and GDP per capita. So you could, create a really cool animation for a presentation that you're giving where you have data like this over time. There's ggridges, which is a really cool package for creating these density plots. So here we're looking at temperatures across all the different months, and you have this really cool like density plot based on the temperature. And yeah, so that's just a quick overview of some of the other cool things you can do based on the ggplot package. Like we said, it's very flexible and it can be used to do a lot of cool visualizations. And I think that really adds a lot to looking at your data. So now going back to our diamonds, we have a few questions or exercises for you guys to work on. The first is going to be reproducing the last plot, but switching your X and your Y. So if you want to go ahead and try that, we want you to put carat as the y-axis and price as the x-axis. So you're basically just switching the variables that you're using for X and Y. And then the second thing we want to challenge you to do is use the MPG data set, which you would load in using data MPG command and create a similar plot to what we did, except looking at the MPG data set is about cars. So we want you to create a plot like this that's looking at fuel economy data. And we will walk through that in a second, but I'll give people time to try to work on that. And I believe the code is also included.
And some other extensions of the ggplot package even allow you to draw networks, graphs, for those of you who are interested in those. So there's the package that's called gggraph. think it's, I just type it on the chat, that will allow you to build social networks and graphs in general using the ggplot engine.
Oh, cool. I haven't used that one before, but I would probably like it. Okay, so first we can go over the solution to the diamonds one, which was just switching the price and the caret in the X and the Y. So if we do that, then we get a slightly different looking plot where we now have price on the X-axis and caret on the Y-axis. So all we did here was switch the variables that we're using in the X and the Y. And then if we plot that, then we can reproduce this plot. There we go. So that was just switching the X and the Y. And it gives us these plots instead, where we can see, yeah, we can see generally kind of similar trend, but flipped. And now coming to the MPG package. So for data set, sorry, not package. If I wanted more info on that, I could go to the help page. And it tells me that the MPG data set is fuel economy data from 1999 to 2008 for 38 popular models of cars. So this is about cars, which is something I know less about than diamonds probably. And it tells us, once again, all the variables in the data set. So it has manufacturer, model, engine displacement, year, number of cylinders, all these variables for the car data. So if we wanted to create a plot for that, first we would load in our data, and then we see it down here. We've got the MPG data set showing up in the environment, 234 observations of 11 variables. And if I wanted to just kind of look at that, I could click on it and get a quick little look at the data set. But if we wanted to go on to creating a plot, so we would start the same way, ggplot, and then telling it what data to use, MPG, plus geom point, and then the mapping. We are using the engine displacement as our X variable, and then highway miles per gallon as the Y variable. And then color, I already forget what this variable stands for, DRV. Type of drivetrain. Okay, and so we're going to color it by that. So it's the same as before. We're just adding in, change the data set name, the X, the Y, the color, and then we're going to label it fuel economy data 1999 to 2008. And then labeling the X and the Y in the color. So engine displacement, highway miles per gallon, and the drivetrain. So if we plot that, here is what it looks like. So we can see it's colored by a drivetrain where there's 3 different options, and we can see that there's a relationship between engine displacement and highway miles per gallon, where it looks like the lower engine displacement is associated with higher miles per gallon. So as your engine displacement increases, it looks like your miles per gallon decrease. And that also is dependent on your drivetrain as well, it looks like. So once again, we were able to pretty quickly create a plot to look at the relationship between engine displacement and highway miles per gallon in a data set. So once again, here's the solution that we just did. We just loaded in the other data set, changed our variables and titles, and created this plot. And then returning briefly to the diamonds again, here's an example doing a different type of plot. So if we wanted to use a box plot instead of a scatter plot, we would change the geom function command to, change from geom point to geom box plot. So here we are telling R that we want to make a box plot instead. And this time we want to look at the clarity in the price of diamonds, or we want to look at the price of diamonds based on clarity, not carat. So to recreate that, we are changing to box plot, and then we're changing our aesthetics to the X variable being clarity and the Y variable is staying as price. And then we're going to fill in the box plot based on clarity. So if we run that, that should recreate the same box plot from the slides. And now we see the price based on clarity. It's a little bit less clear than the carat information, but we can see that there's something going on with clarity and price. So that's just an example of how you would do a different type of plot. We could also look at other variables. I think there's cut of diamond. So if we wanted, we could do that. You could play around with it and take a look at the different categorical variables for that plot. Yeah, we could do it based on cut really quick. It looks like it's rated, good, very good, things like that. So that might be kind of fun if we wanted to, instead of clarity, look at cut and see what the price looks like there. Interesting. So we kind of see probably based on, there's probably something happening with the carat because we would expect the ideal diamonds to be priced higher, but maybe those aren't as big in size as some of the other ones. So we could go back, we could look at the scatter plot. Maybe instead of looking at color, we would want to look at cut and things like that. But I'll leave it up to you guys to play around with that a little bit if you want to. But let's just go over last few things with a few resources to help you guys get started. So like we said, R is open source. So there's a lot of resources and tutorials available to help you. There are free online books like R for Data Science. There's a graph gallery. Bookdown website has a lot of free books about R. R Markdown, which you will learn more about later this week. There's a free online book to talk about that. And then there's also webinars and other things available. So there's really a lot of information out there. I know it can be a little bit overwhelming. Like when I was getting started, I wasn't quite sure where to look, but there's really so many resources and it has a really great community of people who just want to share their knowledge and get other people into using R because it's such a great software. So I think that pretty much wraps up everything we wanted to go over today, just to get you guys familiar with it and familiar with our studio and the editor and the console and things like that. But now I'll turn it over to George and let him wrap it up and if he has anything to add.
Thank you, Sarah. This is great. No, I hope everyone enjoyed it. We will publish the recording on YouTube, and if you have any questions, you can do them if you want, or send us an email. You can even, I think, put issues on the GitHub website that we have. So we will see you on Wednesday, I believe, right? And we'll be using the same Zoom link than today for Wednesday and for Thursday. So you can just go and use that. I think it's Wednesday, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's Wednesday. Thank you.